Ну пошло.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So, summer was very nice, and I see we changed today the paradigm of our audience, from quantity to quality. And I'm very happy to welcome the new track in our conferences. And it's an initiative from our old friend. It doesn't mean that you're old. You are old in context in our cooperation. Means that this contact is quite old. And Gary Kyle, from Colorado Springs, Colorado, come with an idea to create a new track in our conference connected with project. And we are very proud that he inspired us to invite such personality like Professor Darren, Dalcher. I hope I read your name as yeah. My hypothesis is that you have some German roots. And then I read this as a German. But probably you have the better pronunciation of your name. So, it's time to rethink project success. The question is, where is the stress? But it's probably will be also the part of answer on this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Dzień dobry. How did I do? Is that possible?
We can say.
Possible.
We have two possibilities. We should use mic,
Very much.
or if you move here, then it will be better than we will be in touch without mic. May I invite you here to draw question mark. Okay, great.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's particularly a pleasure to be here at the 20th anniversary of the conference. I should start with a little confession. I have this condition. I've been collecting failures for a long time. I'm attracted to project failures. And this is something I can do nothing about. I just have to collect those failures, and we just keep making them, so the collection keeps growing and growing and growing. It's become a little bit of an obsession. I've been doing it for about 30 years. I now have the world's biggest collection, initially of IT project failures, but I've become less fussy over the years, so I collect any kind of failure. As long as it's a project, I'll collect it. If it looks like a project, I'll claim it anyhow. We've moved house 3 times just to accommodate. Every time we had children, my wife said, what are we going to do with the children? I said, I'm not letting go of the failures. I'm keeping those failures. So this has been growing and growing. And thank you everyone in IT for supplying me with a constant, fresh line of failures all the time. It's a real pleasure. It started for me when I was working in IT as a consultant. I was working on 2 projects at the time. And there were 2 significant projects. One of them was, if you think about the traditional triangle, we had the cost fixed, we had the time fixed, we knew exactly what we needed to do, we delivered on time, on budget, We delivered exactly what we had to deliver, and nobody used the system, but everyone said this is a success. You delivered on time, on budget, nobody was using it. And at the same time, we were using a new technique called prototyping. So this is about 30 years ago, and we were doing prototyping, and the project was running later and later. The clients kept changing their mind, playing with the technology. So we delivered about 6 months late. We were over budget. The schedule was obviously 6 months late, but the users loved it, and this was our failure. So I was sitting there as a young professional thinking, I have this success that was delivered on time, but nobody's using it, and I have this failure that the users love. Now, 16 years later, they were still using the failure, and nobody was using the success. So that was the beginning of my journey of making sense of success and failure. How can we actually really make sense of such a scenario? So that started my journey of trying to make sense of them. And what I'll try to do today is to use a few snapshots and share some of the things I found on that journey of making sense of success and failure. I have to admit that having success in the title is quite difficult for me. For years I've been talking about failures, and about 5 years ago a colleague challenged me to do a talk on success, and it felt wrong. I felt I was betraying my collection of failures. I've been collecting them for so long, and here I was asked to talk about success. What could I possibly say? I don't know anything about success. I've been collecting failures. But twisting it around, turning it around was quite an interesting experience. And I'll share that as we go along. So success, well, failure in particular is quite an obsession within certain sectors. We beat ourselves up in IT all the time. And what I'd like to do today then is talk about some of the issues around that. I'll start by talking about the failure-success dilemma, and I've touched on that already. I will then show a few statistics because it's traditional to show that we're doing really badly and there are failures all around us. So I will continue with that tradition, and it'll make me feel better anyhow. It'll help with my condition, so I'll share it with you. I will then propose that we actually need to talk about different levels of success, different ways of approaching success, different ways of framing it, and give a few examples of what happens when we use that perspective, and talk about some of the implications of taking that perspective. So let's start by getting you to think. I know last night you had to work a little bit with the samba, so it's not quite as dynamic, but if we can get the cells going a little bit, I'd like you to think for a second or so, what is success? Not in the context of projects, but generally, what is success? I don't want to limit it to projects yet. Happiness, okay. Becoming happy. Success, anything else? What comes to mind? Setting a goal and reaching it. Anyone else? Success. Something of value. Anyone else? Nothing to do with projects, nothing to do with IT, just generally success. Meeting someone else's expectations.
Oh.
Okay, yes. Anything else from this side? Success? Money, yes. Well, let's get down to yes. It's easy to judge, isn't it? Okay, so if we look at definitions of success, according to the Oxford Dictionary, success is a favourable outcome. Interesting one, next one. Doing what was desired or attempted. That's it, doing what was attempted. So if you did what you did, you're successful. Interesting definition, that one. Accomplishment of an aim or purpose, and the attainment of wealth or fame or position. Reasonably straightforward definition, so it's a good start if we're talking about success. So it should be easy then to think, in that case, what is failure? What is failure then?
Not achieving this.
No money.
Outcome for computer scientists. Negative success, yes. Binary.
satisfied customer.
So what would the Oxford Dictionary say? We've seen the definition of success. It had 4 sections. What will it say about failure? So defining the dictionary as lack of success, easy. So looking at that, it's not that difficult for me. Yes, it's a bit of a binary. There's success, there's failure, and they seem to be opposites according to the Oxford Dictionary. Now, one of the...
Few years ago, there was an article about analytics of all open professorship positions that in countries in IT. And the success measures for young professors was quite simple. They should be able to acquire products. It was on the top of the list. But the realization of the project was at the end of it. It means to be successful is enough to have a project. The realization is irrelevant.
So sometimes, yes, the measures are less demanding. Interestingly, you've probably all seen the Standish, the Chaos reports. The Standish group do regular studies, interesting studies. There's all sorts of questions about them, but the study itself has an interesting position because they say that project resolutions can be one of 3 conditions. They can be successful, and a successful project is completed on time, on budget, with all specified features. That's their definition. Let's jump to the bottom. The failed project. The project is cancelled before completion or never implemented. And then somewhere in the middle, we have the challenge ground, the partial territory, which is challenge, completed and operational, but over budget, over time, and with fewer features than specified. So it's already not a binary. We're already recognizing that there are a few shades of grey. I'm not going to say 50, but there are a few shades of grey between success and failure, and it's not a clear binary position. Now, we tend to beat ourselves up about our success rates, so I was looking for the earliest survey I could find, and that's the 1979 General Accounting Office in the US. The GAO survey looked at software systems, and it said less than 2% of the systems they studied were used efficiently as delivered. 3% could be used after some changes. The rest, just over 95%, were never used, never delivered, or used but extensively reworked or abandoned.
But paid.
Always paid, yes, not success. Absolutely. So the bar is not too high. So 1979, first software survey, 5% success rate, so we could jump over that bar. Not terribly demanding. That's the first survey. We tend to talk about the Standish figures. So the Standish group has been doing their reports for a long time. You tend to see them in most conferences you go to, IT, project management, everybody uses them. So I've aggregated a few of the years from 94 to 2012. In green you see the success rate, starting at 16, going up to 39. In red you have the failures, and the yellow is the challenge projects, somewhere in the middle between the two. So the Standish group has done possibly a service for the community. They keep releasing those figures. There are questions about the methodology, there are questions about the approach, there are questions about a lot of what they're doing with them. But it's an interesting baseline position, and it comes up a lot in conferences, both practitioner conferences and academic conferences. So everyone uses it as evidence without probably looking very closely at what it says. I did obtain a copy of it one year. It costs $50,000. Every year they issue a new report. It's $50,000 to get the annual report. I convinced my dean that I absolutely needed it for research. That was a long time ago, and and we studied it. The methodology is interesting. We'll leave it at that, but it has been challenged, and there are all sorts of issues around it, but it is a benchmark position. And it's an interesting position because it tallies up. How many practitioners here, by the way? Any practitioners, or is it mostly researchers and academics? Any practitioners? A few, okay. So it makes sense in terms of the experiences. And if we do a little rule of thumb, actually the colours didn't quite work out. So if we look, so my basic rule of thumb, roughly, if we look at the projects over the years that the Standish Group have covered, roughly a quarter of all projects were successful, about 25% give or take. Roughly a quarter failed, again about 25%, and roughly half were challenged, so somewhere in the middle between, not quite success, somewhere between success and failure. So quarter, half. So I was thinking a few years ago when we were planning to host the Olympics in London, the 2012 Olympics, I was thinking if we delivered roughly a quarter of the events on time as scheduled in the Olympics, a quarter would never happen and half may happen, not necessarily on the right day, a few months late. How would that go in terms of the Olympic Games? Actually, yes. Wasn't in 2012, but yes, 2016 was closer to the norm. So the question is that an acceptable position? And we're becoming quite accustomed to looking at those figures. And here is an interesting report. This is something released by the PMI a few years ago. And it's the Standish report results against membership of PMI and against the number of PMPs, project management professionals. And basically what it's saying is that as the number of, if you read it this way around, as the number of members of PMI rises, and as the number of PMPs rises, the success rate improves. Interesting figure, isn't it? Years ago, PMI approached me about using it, and I said, be careful with what you do with statistics, be careful with what you do with those measures. It was used in 2004, it was used in 2006, and they've stopped using it. Any idea why? In 2008, the success rate went down. So the number of PMPs went up, the number of members went up, and the success rate went down. So always be careful with how you use data, be careful with the instruments you select. Now, the interesting thing about the Standish Group is they've aggregated and accumulated a lot of projects. So this is 23,000 projects, which is a significant body. And what does it tell us? What do we read from that if we look at it? What do you see?
You should prepare short projects.
Yes, short projects have a much higher likelihood of success. The longer the project, the less likely it is to succeed based on those numbers. Incidentally, if you go to the original Standish figures that we had at the beginning, the roughly quarter, half, quarter, this is for all projects. In larger organizations, the statistics are nowhere near as good. So the highest success rate they've ever had for larger organizations is 9%. So the larger the projects, the larger the organizations, the lower the success rates. And the reason, and by the way, just as a freebie, the reason the success rates are improving in the Standish figures is as we start using more and more agile projects, smaller projects, the success rates are improving. But I'll tell you something else, as someone who's been collecting failures for a long time, I have my agile failures as well. They're in there, they're coming in. They're different failures, but I accept them all. I'm not prejudiced. Agile failures, traditional failures, they're all welcome. And we do have plenty of agile failures now as well, and interesting ones as well. So at this point it's traditional to show lots of statistics of failing projects. Initially, I had about 50 slides full of scary statistics, and this is the point where you show the audience, do you know what is far worse than that? If you look at the money, it's absolutely terrible. This is just one example, but there are lots and lots of statistics. But there's a problem with all those statistics. They are scary, they do have an impact. But it came to me a few years ago, I was asked to do a keynote for the Software Engineering Institute in the US. And it was a very large conference. And they asked me to talk about failures, because that's the only thing I knew anything about. I don't talk about success. So I was going there to talk about failures, and it was a few years ago, so it was the old overhead projector sheets. So towards the end of the presentation, I just had a list of projects, just to frame where we are. And I was going through and I was revealing one at a time. And I started with a small failure, $4 million, $10 million. And as it was going down, I could see the audience were getting excited. So the failures were getting bigger. We got to 100 million, and people started clapping. You could hear a little bit of them in the crowd. Yeah, 100 million, that's good. And then when we got to 1 billion, everybody really got excited. I got a big cheer from everyone. On 1.5 billion, there was a group of people celebrating in the corner. It was actually their project. So there was their company, their project, and they were really celebrating. I was thinking, there's something wrong here. I'm not quite conveying the right message. And I went down, and people were getting more and more excited, and they invited me to come back for a second year. And I came back, and I said, you've got to do this Hall of Shame. Do the Hall of Shame. Everybody loved it. That was the top thing in the conference. So I did it a second year, and then they invited me for a third year as well. And I thought, okay, this is becoming and they said, just bring the whole, nothing else, just the Hall of Shame, and bring the big failures. So everyone is getting excited. So this is the third year, and I'm waiting to go on stage, and now it's a huge conference, about 1,500 people, and suddenly, and I'm about to go on stage, and suddenly I hear the announcer. And from the UK, I give you Failure Man. I was thinking, this is totally the wrong message. I didn't want to come there. And again, everyone was cheering as we were going into the mega failures, and everyone was getting excited. And I was thinking, no, this is the wrong kind of message. But it is a fascinating message, and we love that. And by the way, I got a groupie that year. That third year, there was somebody who came to me at the end. He didn't want anyone else to see him, and he came to me at the end and said, can you send me some information about those failures, those wonderful failures that we have? And I thought, wow, somebody who shares my passion, this is great. And he kept emailing, do you mind if I email you? I said, no, not at all. He kept emailing me, send me failures, bigger failures. And we kept communicating for quite a while. And after a few months, he was very needy. He kept saying, bigger failures. I want those really huge ones. And I sent him 100 case studies of $100 million. No, bigger failures. And we got into the billions, and he was still quite demanding. Then I got a call from him. Watch the news. And I had no idea what I was waiting for. And a few weeks later, there was a story in the US about the IRS system that failed, and it was at 8.2 billion, I think, something of that. So I get a call from him a few weeks later. Did you see me on the news? Did you see me? Apparently, he was the program manager for that project, and he spent 3 years before that trying to convince his bosses that everyone fails in IT, so this is just standard practice. Instead of managing his program, he was collecting stories of failures and taking them, look, they failed as well, so what we are doing is fine. So there's something about failure that's fascinating, there's something about failure that gives us interesting insights, but can we learn from them? So here is a little research that we did. This is a special issue that I edited of Technology Analysis and Strategic Management, and it was basically a collection of failures, technology failures, mostly from Europe, and we looked at commonalities across them. And these are the topics that came up: relationship management, trust, communication, management of expectations, politics, risk management, but not the implementation steps, the allocation of who does what, the understanding of how we're managing it. Escalation, we've already spent $1 billion, therefore we may as well continue. And contract management, and again, not the mechanics, but who's doing what, how do we divide the contracts. What do you see across them? Anything strikes you? Soft things, yes. Isn't it? It's not the... It's those people again, isn't it? Those pesky people on projects. Without people, without cloud, would have perfect project. It's all people issues. It's not methodology, it's not steps, it's not techniques. It's people. It's dealing with people, relationships, trust, communication, expectations, telling them what's going to happen before it hits them on the head. It's the politics. It's all the softer things. And it's very often those softer things that come back and haunt us. Now, as I said, I've been collecting failures for a long time, and I'm proud to say that very often the British government comes to me with interesting cases that they have. And normally they're happy to share them afterwards. They know it's going in a collection, it's going in a good cause. But a few years ago, they started calling me for new projects, and that was a new experience for me. I got a call saying, we have this big project, and I have to be a little bit careful because it hasn't been in the news yet, but I said, we have this big project. And I said, yes, brilliant, can you send me the details? And I said, no, you may want to watch this. I said, what, is it still going? They said, oh, it hasn't started. And I thought, this is interesting. I've been collecting failures for a long time, and now the government is calling me to look at the project that hasn't started. And I came in, and they said, will you do a risk management workshop for us? I said, yes, of course. And they said, it'll be interesting because we'll bring all the stakeholders from the 4 different countries, from the 4 nations, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales. We'll bring them all together. They've never met one another. It'll be interesting. So I said, okay, I think, yeah, that should be interesting. And I came in on the day. There's a huge table, 50 people. They've never met each other. New projects. It's a 9-month project. Huge IT system. Absolutely enormous. Again, I need to be a little bit careful in what I say, but absolutely enormous IT system. 9 months, we're 2 months into the project and it hasn't started, so they have 7 months left. And I'm doing a risk workshop looking at what could possibly go wrong. And I'm going around, I thought, well, the easiest thing to do would be to go around the table and ask each person to introduce themselves, given that they've never met and probably will never meet again, but they're still working on the same project. And I thought I'll ask them just one question. What keeps you awake at night? And I thought that'll be easy. It'll take a few minutes, we'll go around, 50 people, how long can it take? So I started and we went around the first person, who are you, and what do you do on the project, and what keeps you awake at night? And we're going around the table. Now, it's 3 hours later. Everybody is responding really nicely. I've got a few people crying at this point because it was the great, brilliant session. They're telling me what keeps them awake at night, but they're all saying this really is keeping me awake at night. This project is a disaster. It hasn't even started, but that bit is not going to work. And the fascinating thing is, when we're talking about people, everybody had concerns, but as they were saying them, the rest of the other 50 would say, oh, that's nothing, because that connects to that system, and that's going to impact on something else. So as we were going around, it was looking quite gloomy. So towards the end, we had 4 people crying outside, but this is brilliant, it's the greatest relief I've ever had. And as we're going around, we've highlighted a lot of risks, a lot of issues, a lot of things that have never been said before. And that was an absolutely fascinating session for me because everyone was candid, everyone was honest, they wanted this session. We are 2 months into the project, and then at the end, I was supposed to summarize. So I said, well, actually, I've got a few concerns as well. And suddenly everybody sits up. And I thought, that's okay, that's not looking good. And I said, look, it's a 9-month project, you're 2 months into it, 7 months left, you haven't started. And he said, well, that's because the contractors are going across the 4 countries. And I said, why are they going to the different countries? You have 4 existing systems at the moment, you stand it up, you're introducing a new one, replacing all of them. They said, yes, that's because Scotland will never use the same system as England. So I said, let me get this right. We have 4 working systems, everyone is happy with them. Yes. You want to replace them with one bigger system? Yes. And Scotland will never use the same system as England? Yes. I said, you've got a little problem here. No. No, this is a good project. And now, again, I'll be a bit careful, but, and then I said, you've got 60 million records that you've got to transfer. That's the size of an average size bank in the UK. Typically, they would take about 4.5 years to do the data transfer, and they would do it in parallel. They would test it, they would do it gradually. You have 7 months left and you haven't started, and in all the documents I've read, I've seen nothing about it. Yes, we're the UK government, we know what we're doing. That's not funny now. I'm not mentioning Brexit, I'm not going to say a thing about it here, but I do collect failures. But everybody's set up, we know what we're doing with the government, we can make those things happen. And that's when I realized that as individuals, we all know, we can all see the problems. But as a group, something else happens. As individuals, we identify the issues, we identify the problems, we know the people issues. But somehow, put us together in a team, and something totally different happens. And I don't know exactly what it is. But if you think about it, if you were doing some work around the house, you were doing some DIY work and you drilled into a wall and you got a shock, you're going to be careful, you're going to stay away from that wall. Now, I've been collecting failures for a long time, and one of the fascinating things is the same company would come up with the same failure 3 times. Now, you're not going to go back into the wall and drill again. You get your brother-in-law, yeah, can you drill in the wall for me? But you're not going to go and do it yourself. We're quite smart as individuals, but somehow as a group, we make those mistakes, which is quite fascinating. So we know we should be focusing on other success criteria, we know there are problems, and by the way, that system was not delivered in 9 months. That was 5 years ago, and the system is still struggling, and it's probably, realistically, probably not going to be delivered for a very long time. So let's play a little game. Success or failure? Success, failure. Does anyone know what that is? Does anyone recognize it? What's the name? Yeah, Eurostar, Eurotunnel. Success or failure? From what you know about it. Success, failure, what do you think? Success, a few failures. Okay, mostly success, but about a third or so saying failure. And it's interesting because it is the same system. And if we go to an expert, if we ask Gilbert, so we have, how's your project coming along? It's a steaming pile of failure. It's like 15 drunken monkeys with a jigsaw puzzle. I've worked on projects like that. You probably all have as well. In comes the boss. How's your project coming along? Fine, we're doing great. And we've all been there. We have different perceptions, different ways of describing things, different ways of talking about failures. And this is where I want to introduce the different levels of success, the different ways of looking at success. And we recognized over time that we're talking about different things. And the first one is where the conversation normally is. It's the project management success, the traditional triangle, the performance. Are we on time, on budget? What's the performance like? So the first level is where the conversation is. It's where that Standish report is. That's where things are at the moment. The second level, we start talking about project success. Now we are looking at something much bigger. We're looking at the needs, not even the requirements, the actual needs. What is needed here? What are the stakeholders after? So we're looking at the ultimate needs and whether they're being achieved. That's the project. Is the project delivering what was intended? Level 3 is becoming a lot more trendier now as well. As we talk about the business success, we are looking at benefits. We are looking at the value delivered. We're looking at what we are realizing as a result of the project. So when we talk about extended life cycles in projects now, we are looking at benefits. It's beyond handover. It happens later on, but it's within the project context. And finally, at level 4, we talk about what happens over time. Can we adapt? Can we adjust? What do we do with the future? Are there any new opportunities? Is there any new potential to do something about it? So let's go back to case 1, the Eurotunnel. And we had a kind of a mixed reception here. Actually, incidentally, just before we do that, remember my 2 experiences. I was working on 2 projects. On time, on budget. No one ever used it, but it was a success. It was a level 1 success. Nobody was using it because it didn't satisfy the needs. At the same time, I had another project. Remember, I had a prototyping project, and we spent a lot of time with the clients understanding their needs. We gave up on the time and budget. We were going beyond that. So we had a level 2 success and a level 1 failure on that one, and the opposite on the other project. And that's where I was struggling. That's what I was trying to make sense of. So using that as a lens, if we look at Eurotunnel opened in 1994. It basically, as you know, connects France and the UK. It was open 18 months behind schedule, which means it missed 2 summers. Summer is the business. Summer is where you make all the money, so it missed 2 of those, which is very, very significant in the original plan. So that set it back significantly. The original budget was 2.3 billion. The actual cost was 6 times higher at 15 billion. So is that success or failure? 2.3 billion, 15 billion. Huge losses, but it was worse than that because the money was paid by investors. It wasn't as bad in the UK, but in France the French government didn't get involved. So when the project went from 2.3 billion to 15 billion, they came after the investors. And people who invested in it for their retirement, especially in the south of France and in Pas-de-Calais, ended up being asked to pay the extra costs. Some of them had to sell the houses. I remember I did a presentation in Lille, and there were a few people there who lost their homes. So again, there were people crying. Something about projects, isn't it? They make people cry as well. So it was a great financial disaster, but it's a major engineering success. You can get from the center of London to the center of Paris in about 2 hours, 10 minutes. Forget the airport, forget queues, forget security. 15 minutes you're on the train. 2 hours, 15 minutes later you're in Paris. So even on a foggy day, you can still find us. The rest of Europe is not alone. We're the other side of the tunnel. We're still there. It's a huge engineering success. Great for families, great if you don't want the hassle of the airport security 3 hours beforehand and traveling in from the center of one city to the center of another. Works perfectly. Case 2. Original estimate 10 million pounds. Final cost 431 million. Less than 10. Delivered at over 431. Actually, that's a slight mistake there. It's 4,200% cost overrun, isn't it? Could you get away with that? Go to your boss, said, I know I said I'll do it for 10, but here it is for 431. Would anyone's boss accept that? Probably not. Does anyone know what the project is? Opened in October 2004. Here's a picture of it just before it opened. Does anyone recognize it? It's the Scottish Assembly Building, Hollywood Palace. Less than 10 million and then delivered for 431. Maybe there's politics there as well. What about this one? Does anyone recognize? This is a successful project. Right? This project was completed on time, on budget, opened in July 1940, cost 6.4 million, Center span 2,800 feet, so it's about 850 meters. No. 1,000 feet approach on each side, so it's about 300 odd meters on each side. Huge bridge. On time, on budget, big party, handover successful. So why am I telling you about it? Is this familiar? Yeah. Have you seen this before?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. You said yes. Yeah, the common arrows. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the common arrows, sorry, yes. You can see a person there in the middle.
He doesn't look nervous.
He's gone back. He's actually been evacuated and he's run back onto the bridge to get to his car. His car was on the bridge, he was safe on the side. He goes back on the bridge because the dog is in the car. So he's gone back for the dog. In the video, he changes his mind pretty quickly and comes back. And you're getting a 45-degree swing now. Now in IT, what do we call it? A feature. Microsoft will say, this is a feature. This is great. You pay for this and you get a feature. But it continues to swing and the feature becomes even a bigger feature. And bigger still. Nobody actually died except for the dog in the car. Everyone else was rescued. But it was delivered on time, on budget. Handover was successful. It lasted 4.5 months until the right wind or the wrong wind. 4.5 months. And the fascinating thing about the story, so it cost 6.4 million. There was an insurance policy for 6 million. So after the bridge collapsed, the natural thing, well, we've got to build a new one. So we have an insurance policy for $6 million. Now the agent ran away with the money. He said, who's ever heard of a bridge collapsing? He ran away with the 6 million. So the intention to build the next one was somewhat thwarted by the missing insurance money, which was never recovered. Okay, and does anyone recognize this? In London, the Millennium Dome. It was open to celebrate the millennium in London. It had a big exhibition inside it, which was going to last 1 year. Enormous exhibition. And they reckon that in this 1 year, 30 million people will come and watch the exhibition. That's the business case. 30 million people will come and watch it and pay £30 each. So pay £60 each to come and watch it. They didn't. It was opened on time, kind of. Midnight, it was meant to open at midnight. Now imagine the Queen is waiting outside in the rain, Tony Blair, it's raining, and people are running inside just making sure the exhibits are working. There was a slight problem with the exhibits. It was a wonderful exhibition, full credit, absolutely a beautiful exhibition. It had different zones. You could walk into the human body, walk into the heart, walk into the brain. There were all kinds of amazing exhibits, but they couldn't interact with people. It's those people again. As soon as people started touching them, they started breaking. But it was a wonderful exhibition otherwise. So the Queen and Tony Blair are waiting in the rain, and they're trying to prop everything up, making sure that all the things they're likely to touch are working. So they almost finished on time. It was kind of on budget, but people didn't go. People didn't want to pay £60 to see an exhibition, especially when all the newspaper reports said that everything was broken. Things were not working. So they kept it open for another year, half the price, and still people didn't come. They mothballed it, paying 60 million a year just to just for security, until they sold it for close to nothing to be regenerated. Now it's the most successful arena in the UK, the O2, and the current figures make it the most successful arena in Europe. In a new context, new perspective. One more case, the Advantic system. Massive effort by Kodak to develop the APS, the Advanced Photo System. In 1996, it was selected by Business Week as one of the best new products of 1996. So clearly a project success. PMI recognized it as an International Project of the Year, so clearly a project management success. But anybody with an APS system? Last few presentations I did, there were a few people in the crowd saying what a brilliant system it was. It was a wonderful technology, but they missed the market. They didn't anticipate digital photography. They spent a fortune on it. Great project management, never sold. The business case wasn't there because the market shifted, the market moved. And the final case, success or failure? You recognize the building, right? Sydney Opera House. Success or failure? Right. So, 14 times over budget, project management failure. I put down project failure as well because it's to do with the needs, isn't it? What would you expect to do in an opera house? Listen to music. What can't you do in the Sydney Opera House, or what couldn't you do? Listen to music. Otherwise, it was a wonderful building. 14 times over budget, not good for music, but look at that, looks wonderful, doesn't it? Very convincing. It's become an icon, it's become a tourist attraction. People go to Australia to see the building. The tours are amazing. And I really admire what they've done there, because they've taken a failure. People from all over the world are coming to see the failure. I really appreciate that. It's failure museums all over the world. So I fully appreciate the sentiment and the fact that it generates revenue. It's become a huge success, but from something that was ultimately not quite up to the task. Now, another tiny bit of research, very quickly. We talked to a number of people, many project managers working on failures, and we asked them what remedy would have resolved your recent failure. What do you think the number one answer was? Money? Time? Communication? Anything else? If you're working on a failure, what else do you think that they would have asked for?
Resources, manpower.
More people. Okay, so here is their wish list. And we asked for the number one thing. So their wish list, number one was better project management. Different project management. Not one focused on the traditional triangle. Improved progress monitoring, seeing where you are, what you're doing, how you're doing. Improved communication, absolutely right. Conflict resolution techniques. And finally, time and money. We can always do with more of that. The future challenges then. We need to extend the idea of success. Success is not just up to handover. Success goes beyond that to cover the usage. We expect a bridge to last, we expect the system to be there. We increasingly talk about extended life cycles. I know the APM in the UK and IPMA to some extent are pushing extended life cycles, benefits realization, looking at a longer term horizon. So extending beyond handover to think what else is happening, benefits, value. We need to think about decommissioning. We're becoming increasingly more responsible for sustainability. Where is the decommissioning? How is it happening? Where is that included? We need to think about future opportunities. We may need to address failure and success at multiple levels. Sometimes killing a project make sense from a portfolio level. So we need to think about those things, and we can start mapping the different dimensions. So we can start comparing different failures. If we do a radar chart, we can compare how they're doing in different dimensions. We get different pictures, different perspectives on how they're doing. In terms of the conclusions, it's been a long journey for me. I'm still collecting failures. I still appreciate them all. But I recognize that success is a complex and multi-layered concept. It needs to be understood at different levels and different times. A bridge that's standing at handover can collapse the next day. So the time frames are important. The impact can extend beyond a single project if we're connecting things, if you're looking at usage, if you're looking at benefits, it extends the horizon we are looking at, and the success view determines the actions and colors new developments and new perceptions. Final close. Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. And that's Winston Churchill, and I did say that I love collecting failures, so I'll leave you with one final failure. And this is from the UK, and according to the Public Accounts Committee, that's the committee that looks after the government, the Home Office spent £29 million thinking about a building. £29 million thinking about a building. A quarter went to consultants, the contracts were signed with the builders. When planning permission was denied, when the Home Office in the UK, the internal department, couldn't get planning permission, the Home Office had to pay £7.9 million in termination fees. So they've wasted £29 million not having a building, but it gets better. Because I don't want to leave you with a negative story. I said this is about success. So here is the government's success here. Despite the loss of £29 million, it was reported by the government it has a happy ending. The Home Office declared that there was an overall positive impact for the public as officials have learned important lessons. So now we know how much it costs to teach the government a lesson. Most of us academics provide courses that are probably more reasonable than £29 million, and you can learn your lessons and try not to repeat them. There are lots of interesting projects that are successful, but there are also many projects that are not. But sometimes it depends on the measures, and it depends on what we are looking at and why we are looking at it. Be careful with the measures, be careful at what you're using. Standish sounds scary, but think about where the estimates come from, think about what they actually mean, and whether they're realistic, and whether the project delivers what is meant to be delivered. And try not to have those lessons. I will be out there collecting failures all the time, so if they keep doing it, I'll keep collecting them. It makes me happy anyhow, I feel a lot better, but enjoy your projects. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Remarks, inspirations?
Thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. So I'm not the whole Schengen guy, but it was quite interesting. So thank you very much also for the speech. I was asking myself if organization structure is one of the indicators of success or failure, and can you give us some hints in regards of flat hierarchies or shallow organization hierarchies, like startups or young organizations, if they have more success in projects?
Well, that's quite a complex set of questions. Startups are quite interesting because they're not scared of failure. And they're quite fascinating. In the UK, the APM, the Association for Project Management, issued their 2020 vision that no projects will fail. And that's quite an interesting vision. They've issued it about 5 years ago, and there hasn't been any particular improvements. But it's quite a conservative vision in a sense. Sorry, no pun intended. It's quite a conservative vision because it's ignoring startup organizations, it's ignoring innovation, it's ignoring trial projects. Smaller organizations are far more innovative. They don't use the normal structures. They're more agile, not necessarily using agile methodologies, but they deal with failure in a different way. So they have a different way of engaging with that. They have a different way of experimenting. And they're getting some fascinating results. They are more resilient, if anything. They spend less time anticipating the results. They're just trying things out to see whether they work or not. And if not, then they change direction a little bit and continue. And they also use bits that they've known in the past. My son works for a startup organization that's extremely successful, and they just keep trying new things. They do learn lessons as they go along in a way most organizations don't. And they just try out things. So the structure is important, the type of industry, the perspective, but they're less fearful of failure.
Okay. It was very interesting. We are proud. We are in the budget. It was successful? It was successful or failed? The question is about the keynote speech. Success! Congratulations! Thank you very much. You have here a success story of our city. So, Cora is optimistic, you are optimistic, and we are successful. Thank you so much. The lesson learned for me, especially during the inauguration ceremony, I use at least the word success, I don't know, 10 or 20 times. So now I understood what I said. Thank you. Thank you so much.